y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're going to review a movie. Now, I haven't done many movie reviews, so I kind of wanted to do this because I wanted to mention. You'll see when I get there. There's a specific reason why I'm doing this, and the movie we're reviewing is Lords of Chaos, starring Jack Kilmer, Emery Cohen, and Rory Culkin, directed by Jonas Åkerlund, which is based on the story of the band Mayhem. If you're not familiar with them, they're a Norwegian black metal band. Now, I'm going to preference this. I know of Mayhem. I have heard some of their music. I'm not a Norwegian black metal fan. Most of the genre I really don't enjoy. I've heard music from there. It's just not my taste. The reason I watched this movie is because I was very familiar with this story, being a fan of heavy metal and all music. In the 90s, it was hard to stay away from the story of Mayhem and all the complex layers in there. And I did have a friend, Andy, who was one of my best friends growing up, still one of my best friends to this day. And he was a huge fan of all that, the death metal scene, the black metal scene. He loved all that stuff. So I would hear stories from him, and I would see stuff in, like, Kerrang! Magazine or Metal Hammer or whatever the magazine of the day was about this band Mayhem, and I would hear the music. And the story, I kind of knew a little bit going into this. And just to put this out there, if you haven't seen the movie yet, there are going to be spoilers. So, if you want to skip now and probably go to the end where I tell you what I think overall. Go to the last minute and that'll tell you my overall views and feelings and if you should like the movie or not. Or go see the movie, actually. Reason I'm mentioning this, I seen all the story, I knew the story, and to cover it quickly, Mayhem started off, they're one of the pioneers, if not the pioneer, of Norwegian black metal. And it's really a story of three different people, at least this movie's version of it is, and that's the main character, which is Rory Culkin as Euronymous, who was the guitarist and pretty much leader of the band. Then you have Jack Kilmer as Dead, who was the the singer in the band. And then Emery Cohen, who played Varg, and I don't want to say his last name because I'm going to pronounce it badly, who at first was in another band, Buzzrum, and then eventually joined Mayhem and was part of the circle of the bands here. Now, I'm going to mention a few things here. There's some things I found about this movie that I liked, and there's a lot that I didn't like. Now, one of the things I liked is they seemed to want to, at least early in the movie, I kind of liked how they went going from the high definition 4K and then dialing back the resolution to give us what I've seen in metal magazines, and I know other fans have, and especially fans of the genre, some of the iconic photos of the band or stuff from the band. So we would see it dial back to that, and I kind of like the dichotomy of that, like showing basically they're peeling back the layers to what it was, is kind of how I felt about it. There were some things I enjoyed. Overall, going by performance, my favorite performance in the movie was Jack Kilmer as Dead. Now, I don't know a whole lot about him, the person, or actually the actor either. But the way he played him and what I do know and what is portrayed in the movie is that he was a guy that was obsessed with death, that would pick up dead animals on the side of the road, that kept a dead crow in a bag so he could smell death before he went on stage to sing, that was contemplating suicide pretty much his entire life and just led a kind of really miserable existence that wanted to die and was obsessed with being dead and as his name. And he's the reason why they did the corpse paint. It wasn't because of Kiss or Merciful Fate or anything of that nature. It was because he wanted to look like a corpse. And that's hence why they call it corpse paint. But anywho, his portrayal of the character and the way that you could see his mental problems and the way he treated it, I found that really to be the best portrayal of anyone in the film. I found it to be the character that was the most complex, however, also being the easiest one to relate to in a weird way. Even though I don't have those same feelings, I could relate to how he felt. He made the character relatable for you. And ultimately, he commits suicide in the movie, which happened in real life. And one of the famous things about Mayhem is the guitarist, Euronymous, found dead in their house that they were sharing and took pictures of it, and it became an album cover, which they showed in this movie to effect, which I believe they had to do because of what happened in the movie. So, his character, I would have liked to see more of his character in the movie. I think he was a bright spot in the movie. They covered a lot of the controversy around the band, the church burnings, the stuff of that nature. There was this constant thing in the story going on in the movie of who's a poser and who's not, who deserves to be in the circle of friends, or black circle as they called them, or who didn't. And coming off of that, I'm going to mention Varg, Emery Cohen's character. Now, there are some things I know because I've seen interviews with the actual Varg the person, and the way he was played in this movie is a lot different than the person. Now, I don't know if they wanted to do that to kind of take away the effect of someone that's actually a murderer, or if, as he says, he killed someone in self-defense, that they didn't want to make a hero out of him. However, they played the character differently. I've seen other movies where, like movies about Ted Bundy or, say, Charles Manson, where they still show their charismatic side and show why people would be drawn to them. Whereas this movie, I believe Jonas Ackerlund kind of struggled with this a lot in not wanting to make heroes out of these people who kind of, I guess he feels, don't deserve to be heroes. And if they did commit the crimes they did, which Varg spent a good amount of time in jail for the crimes he committed, I could see why he would go that route. However, it made the character came off really simple. We see him at first, he meets Mayhem as basically a fan of the band, and Euronymous points at a Scorpions patch he has on his jacket, basically saying that you're a poser. So the next time we see him, because he mentions his name is Christian, the next time we see him, he's Varg, coming into Euronymous' record store and bringing a demo tape and calling Euronymous a poser for having Scorpions at the store, which he recognizes the kid, obviously. They struggle to show whether Varg was a fan that was trying to impress his idols so much that he did these awful things like church burnings and such. And a lot of times they played him off as a goof, that he wasn't intelligent, that he made stupid decisions and was just a goofy person. Whereas the real person is an extremely charismatic human being. And I could say that it's difficult wrapping your head around that, but if you think about it, like someone like Charles Manson, someone like Adolf Hitler, these are charismatic people that there's a reason people follow them, because they have that charisma. And I never got that feeling off of Emery Cohen's portrayal. And not that I'm saying that Emery Cohen did a bad job. He may have been directed this way. I feel like the story, and we'll get to that in a moment, which is my biggest problem in the movie, I feel like as part of the story, anytime they tried to get Varg to where he would seem to be a hero or the anti-hero of the movie, they tried to dial it back with Varg doing something ridiculously stupid. So I feel like they tried to toe that line, but didn't want the crowd or the viewers to basically make a hero out of him. And that's on that performance. Now, the main character, Euronymous, we see him, he's basically the narrator of the film slash main character. We see him go from like living a family life to what he does. Now, the thing, and one of the things that I felt that they missed here, they didn't show why these people were into such extreme things. What is the environment they grew up in? What made them so obsessed with satanic themes and death and murder and, all this other stuff? What drove them to that? And they never really addressed that. They kind of danced around that. And to me, that would have been a more interesting part of the story than what they showed. Now, they also had a problem with this character. Much like with Varg, it kind of felt like two different movies were made and they spliced them together. Because we never get to see... We get the feeling that Euronymous himself was a poser or not worthy of the scene that he created, and someone that was basically a character in the scene and not really what the scene represented, while being juxtaposed with him being the Dr. Frankenstein that created the scene and lost control of his monster, which would be Varg. And they kind of went back and forth with that. And they didn't really build sympathy for Euronymous, who ultimately is the person that gets murdered in the movie. They never gave you anything to jump on and say, nothing you could really relate to, because he never was made... You were never made to feel like he was anything other than a one-dimensional character. At times he's played as a bully, at times he's played as, a guy that thinks he's better than everyone else, and then at other times he's played as just a guy that made this up for show. And that's where the movie has its biggest problems. I feel like Jonas Åkerlund, the director, couldn't decide what he wanted to do with this movie. I understand it's not historically accurate, and people that are involved in the bands that were involved in the movie have all come out and said that they're not in agreement with what happened here. And I understand. I think he had to toe the line a bit with, like I said, they represented church burnings, they represented murder, suicide. I think he wanted to tell the story, but he also wanted to toe the line to say, don't go down this route. However, it's never really played off as a cautionary tale either. It's not... It kind of feels like the entire movie, the movie itself struggles to find its voice, which it never does. And it never gets you. By the end of the movie, I don't care that Euronymous gets killed. I knew it was going to happen, but I wasn't drawn into the fact that it was going to happen. It didn't bother me. Now, parts did bother me. They showed some scenes of Dead cutting his wrists and cutting his arms on stage, which were extra graphic. And also showing his suicide in a very graphic way, and also showing the murder who Faust from another band, I forget what band he's from, and please don't flame me in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, not a huge fan of the genre, was interested in the movie portion. Faust from another band kills a gay man, goes to a bar, gets a gay man, brings him out in the woods, kills him. They show that very graphically. They show the church burnings in graphic detail. They show the murder that ultimately ends the movie, the murder of Euronymous by Varg, in very graphic detail. A little bit, at sometimes it felt a little bit too much. But maybe that was Jonas Åkerlund's way of saying, hey, look at how bad this actually is. He's not trying to glamorize it. However, doing that does glamorize it a bit. So, like I said, the whole movie it's very bipolar. We don't know if who's going to be the hero, who's not supposed to be the hero, what our motivation is. Are we supposed to like Varg? Are we supposed to like Euronymous? Are we supposed to feel a connection to either or both? The only character that comes across that I felt a connection with was Dead, which is really weird because he's nothing like me at all. I'm a very happy person that doesn't obsess with death, that doesn't want to commit suicide. So, for him to be the character that I most felt a connection with speaks to both the actor and the way his role was written. I feel like they didn't have as much trouble writing him as a sympathetic character as they did with both Varg and Euronymous, because ultimately, Varg is, quote unquote, a murderer and a church burner, and Euronymous also, as shown in the movies, had his hand in some church burnings, and at the very least was a mastermind figure with the other actions that went around. Faust killing a gay man, and ultimately Varg killing him. So, to me, the movie never actually got its voice. And it's a real shame because Jonas Ackerlund is someone who actually was in the band Bathory, who was an influence on Mayhem. So he knows the scene. He's from that scene. I would have liked to see a story that more showed us about the scene, why this happened, why were church burnings something that they decided to do, why was the music so evil and so satanic, and why were so many of the people in this scene obsessed with death and murder, and we never get that. Another thing we never get to see how big of a band Mayhem was. Now, I know they're not on the level of someone like Metallica or Slayer or Anthrax, any of the bigger heavy metal bands that were out there, but they did have a modicum of success. And the only time we see that is we see that Euronymous starts his own record label, which is they show as a failure in there, which, if you believe some stories, it's because of how bad of a businessman he was. And in one scene, he's showing Varg, there's a map on the wall, and he's got pins in it where different places have sent him tapes of heavy music from all around the world. But we don't get to see, like, how far Mayhem went and how important they are or were to the heavy metal scene. They still are a very important cog in what happened in extreme metal. And they never really touch on that. I think this would have been better handled with it being made into a series on, like, Netflix. I think a lot of it being condensed into an hour and a half film kind of hurt it. Maybe if we had a 5-part series on Netflix with a little bit more historic accuracy, I think it might have made a better movie. If they would have decided what they want to do with each character, how they would have portrayed them. And I'm not saying that these guys are bad actors. Don't get me wrong. You could definitely see that when they were set, when they're doing a certain thing, they're doing it really well. It's just the fact that the movie is so bipolar that the second they draw you into one thing, it flips on its head and you no longer care about what they just did. So I believe it's more of the editing and directing of the movie than the acting. I think the actors are actually probably really good actors. Jack Kilmer, especially, who is, to me, the star of the movie. But overall, the real reason why I wanted to do this review is I sought out to see this movie, and I wanted to mention all this to anyone else that would, because I don't recommend watching this movie. It's not a good movie. Dead is the only redeeming character. If you're a fan of Mayhem, you're probably going to be upset that they didn't do it justice. If you're not a fan of Mayhem, you're not going to understand what a lot of this is, which may be my problem, maybe part of the problem that I had with the movie is I wasn't a huge fan of the band, so I didn't understand a lot of it. They never take the time to explain it to us, the new viewers, because, just being honest, there's probably going to be more people that watch this movie than there are that are actually fans of the band. And that's not a knock on the band, just the movie itself is a massive Hollywood production against something like a very limited subset of a musical genre. No knock on fans of Mayhem. There's tons of them. I'd love to have that many fans on this show. But just the simple fact of the reach of both of them. This movie's going to be something that I assume eventually is going to go on HBO or Showtime or Netflix, and people are going to stumble on it and just watch it just because they think it looks interesting. That's where I wanted to get at from my point of view. As someone that kind of knew the story, didn't know the full story, I feel like they didn't fill in the enough of the holes for me. I feel like they didn't do a good enough job with this movie. And I'd like to see it redone in a series, and I don't think it's ever going to get that treatment because I believe this is going to be the barometer that is the only thing that shows that scene. And that's a real shame because we have good movies about the punk rock scene. We have good movies about the invention of the rap scene. I'm sure at some point somebody's going to do a great movie about Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. We got movies coming out soon about Motley Crue. We have a lot of movies that explain and show why a musical genre came from and what it did, and this one isn't one of them. With that being said, as I do on everything, I rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. I honestly got to give this movie a 0. I can't even give it a 1. I would have liked to see another director directed it with the same cast, because I think the cast wasn't the problem. I think it was the directing and editing. But overall, it's not a good movie. I don't recommend you watch it. But that's my opinion on it. Let me know what you think in the comments if you've seen the movie, if you're looking forward to see the movie. If you're a fan of Mayhem, let me know what you think down here. My name is George Coles, and this has been my review of Lords of Chaos.